This is a Willets Point Shea Stadium bound 7 express train. The next and last stop is Willets Point, Shea Stadium.
Oh, yes, it is the Subway to Shea podcast. Anthony Rivera here with you, talking about all the news and happenings surrounding that team from Queens, the New York Mets. Episode 190 from the Subway to Shea studios in my office. And what does that mean? We are 10 episodes away from 200. Make sure you're subscribing, whether it's on YouTube, if you want to listen, Apple Podcasts and Spotify. But if you want to be a part of the chat, you want to be a part of the stream, you want to put comments, questions in, you're going to want to subscribe on YouTube because that's the best way to do it. You could also watch on X as well. And make sure you're following me on X, Instagram, and TikTok at Subway to Shea. You can follow me personally at Ant Rivera 86. Now, there's a lot of stuff that's going on in Port St. Lucie with this New York Mets team, from Clay Holmes being named the opening day starting pitcher. We got Brandon Nimmo at 90% ready to go to opening day. Will he be a DH? Will he be playing left field? You had a scare earlier on in the day with Jesse Winker. Thankfully, it's just a cramp that he had in his calf, so he's going to be okay. We saw Daniel Nunez get back on the mound. We saw great outings from Griffin Canning and as well as Jose Budo. So the Mets got a lot of things going on, but today is heavily focused on the Mets prospects. Now, we had Joe DeMaio on a couple of months ago, or maybe I should say a couple of weeks ago. I tend to lose sight of the day and time. And we're going to get into the spring breakout today and all the top prospects heading in to the start of the season. Shout out, 32 people already in the chat, ready to chime in. Nelson Cruz, I see you. Brad, Carlos Ortiz, D is in the house. Aaron Manning in the house as well. Appreciate you all for being in there. Everyone come in, join the show. The more people in here, the more it gets out there, the more people can see what is going on. But I'm going to bring on my guest today, who's very big on Mets prospects. It's Ernest Dove. He's back on the show. We did this a year ago, Ernest, when they had spring breakout last year. So I'm glad to have you back on. New York Mets prospects reporter, covers St. Lucie Mets, and he can check him out on YouTube on the New York Mets Dove Report. And follow him on X at Ernest Dove. Ernest, how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing good. Yeah, it's my favorite time of the year, man. This is my World Series. Just watching that game more than anything.
Yeah, I got to ask you about that. Before we get into the game itself, let's talk about just the spring breakout as a whole. You know, I really like the fact that it showcases the top prospects, especially for a guy like me that doesn't really get to see them on a daily basis. I'm covering the major league team, and all I do is hear from, your work, your great work that you do, the great work that Joe DeMaio does as well, about all the prospects and the top 10 prospects. There are prospects that, I may not see outside of the top 10 that get featured in this game. So I really like what they've done here throughout the league to have at least a game for the prospects to be out there in spring training. It's really been great to see.
Yeah, it was pretty exciting. And also, even with the Mets, or I don't know about all the other teams, but the Mets, they didn't even have a lot of their top prospects as well. So you got to see some of the depth in the organization. I mean, obviously rankings are what they are. Like my buddy Teddy Klein on social media is always like, I don't want to, you never rank humans. It's terrible. So I get it. But as far as the rankings themselves go, like a consensus ranking, many of the top 20 guys weren't participating. Even some people were asking me about it, and I was even reporting, well, hey, in the week leading up to the spring breakout game, Tidwell was pitching and Nolan McLean was pitching in the backfields. And I know Nolan McLean pitched about 4 innings, so he wasn't going to pitch 4 in the game. So there's probably a lot of factors that are involved, and I'm sure these guys probably really wanted to be in a game like this, but it probably also sounds like structurally, there's other factors that go into this stuff, especially for the pitchers trying to ramp up and do what they need to do before the minor league season.
Absolutely. And the Mets defeated the Nationals 5-1. Game got stopped short because of inclement weather. But some of the top performances we're going to go through, and I want to go through each of these players. We got to start off with the starting pitcher of the game, Jonah Tong, 2 innings pitched, no earned runs, had 3 strikeouts, hit around 99 miles per hour. What were your takeaways from his performance? It wasn't the, I guess, elite of what we've seen from Jonah Tong in the minor leagues last season, but he did pitch very well, and he pitched around, some men on base and did a great job at doing that.
Well, I mean, obviously, it's still spring one way or another. The most exciting part about the entire outing for him was his fastball velocity anyway, just being 96, 97. I think Joe DeMayo had it at like 98.5 somewhere, one of them. So for him to throw 97 or maybe topping out 98-ish, that's all I need to know, because I know last season he's a slow starter. Like, he was delayed to his pro career. If you want to start talking about Jonah Tong from the draft, when you go post-draft, it's just a blank screen. Like, it took a while. There was some stuff behind the scenes, especially with the medical stuff with minor leaguers. No one really discloses it unless it really gets out there one way or another. So he was delayed for probably maybe, a year and a half? I mean, it started slow. And then last year, he ate a lot of innings. And I know his velocity was like 92, 94. And people were like, what happened? Is he hurt? Is he in trouble? I'm like, I talked to coaches. They're like, we think the velocity is going to come back. So in that game, my main impression for the whole outing, I'm super excited about Jonah Tong because his velocity's back. And again, short, only pitched 2 innings. I'm not declaring he's going to throw 97 for like 7 innings, but in general, isn't that exciting? With a guy like this in his early 20s to have his velo back, that's going to be pretty telling, especially since I basically almost compared him on a ranking level to Sproat last year, and it kind of got people going, what? So, hey, maybe I can pat myself on the back, or I'm getting too excited, but that's how highly I think of Jonah Tong. I was considering him a 1A to Sproat in the ranking system of the Mets organization.
Well, the fact that you are comparing them, is Tong a candidate to climb the rankings and the minors just like Brandon Sproat did last season?
See, that's the thing. Obviously, Sproat was a senior sign. I'm not saying it should be easy or normal for you to jump a million levels like Sproat did, but Tong had to start off a lot slower. And again, he barely pitched. When he finally got into some pro ball, he ate like 4 or 5 innings and like way in the backfields. So it's a whole different stride to him. But at this point, Jonah Tong has already reached AA, which I would definitely assume he's repeating AA for sure. The Mets are going to need too much depth and probably in Syracuse anyway, as title contending teams are going to do. But I could see Jonah Tong at least reaching AAA in 2025. I just don't see him being like pushed. Like, even if he's amazing in the whole season, I don't think a kid like this is going to get jumped in season to the majors at his age and his experience. But I can see basically 2026, one way or another, he's probably going to be in major leagues, knock on wood, health and, normal player development wise.
I want to bring up a tweet that you posted yesterday, as you said that the future Sproat, Tong, McLean Mets rotation is going to feed families. I got to ask you first off the bat, which of these 3 do you think has the best repertoire and chance to be a possible ace of a staff, maybe of the Mets staff?
I mean, that's it's always hard to go with the ace thing, but I know a lot of people like projections like the SP1, SP2, SP3. See, absolute ceiling wise, it's hard to not think about 98 to 100 that Sproat can throw. Obviously, again, we just talked about Jonah Tong hitting it, but in games, Jonah Tong over 5-6 innings in a rotation, maybe he's probably going to be 94, 96 and maybe top out at one of those things. But you kind of think Brandon Sproat with command. So we got to do the pitch command. I mean, that's a thing from college. This isn't anything that Dove is, breaking any ground here. If the walk rate can be tamed, and I had coaches tell me they love his work ethic. He's doing everything asked of him since he turned pro. So he's doing everything they're telling him. He would be the guy basically because of how hard he throws with the other arsenal of pitches that he has. I know a guy like Jonah Tong, even from last year, we know about the fastball, which again, the velocity dipped last year. His 12-6 hook, the 12-6 hook is still there, still beautiful. So now it's a matter of the other pitches. Can he command all of them combined? So maybe, and then Nolan McLean is like the wild card because he got drafted as a two-way player and he was going to be a DH/reliever. And now all of a sudden, he's ranked in everyone's top 10 to 15, and he's in a rotation plans for everybody. I mean, that's the elite stuff that Nolan McLean has. Again, one of the pitching coaches told me to buy stock in Nolan McLean. He told me that last spring. So is he going to be a frontline rotation starter? I mean, it'd be such a leap from going from thinking he's a reliever. Of the three, right now you have to think Sproat has the embodiment of the frontline-ish stuff in general. But again, Jonah Tong, who's still only, 21? I'm not sure if he turned 22 yet. You give him another 2-3 years, and he keeps refining his command and the other pitches. That little rising fastball, if he can get that with the right commitment and right command, the two of them can be one or two starters as an absolute ceiling. Just McLean is such a wild card stud to me. Now I'm confused. Even Dove, the prospect hugger, I don't know how to evaluate Nolan McLean. They saw some of his filthy stuff now in the last week. Like, that ball was moving. It was ridiculous watching videos online. He throws a wiffle ball. So, and he did eat a lot of innings last year as well, coming off as a reliever in college. The Mets had him eat all kind of innings, so he'll be ready to go. But again, I just think the three of them, and again, last year we had We had Vassell, Tidwell, Hamill. Those were all the names. And then Tidwell was up and down. Hamill was kind of inconsistent.
Yeah.
Vassell kind of went down in the K rate, and then he's off the organization right now, which again, I think he just pitched a nice little shutout against the Mets in spring.
He did.
Playing for the Rays. So you know what? I have to respectfully be very excited, and I'm happy for Mike Vassell for what he did. But again, you have those names, and then here we are in the offseason. We're talking about three totally different guys in the 1, 2, 3 rankings in the Mets farm system. I mean, these things happen fast. And again, with these three guys, if they're all healthy, and then you even get like a Christian Scott back next year, in the next few years, these are where the depth arms is going to kind of look a little bit scary in a good way, so that there's going to be no more indie ball stuff. There's going to be no more waiver wire. Hopefully the Mets farm system is going to be stockpiling like they need to, like the Dodgers or something, or even a high-paid version of the Rays now, where every time one guy moves for whatever reason, the other guy is going to step in. This is what seems to be happening right now. And we're not even talking about a guy like Pintaro, who's coming out of absolute nowhere from indie balls and creating his own little new destiny right now as we speak.
Yeah, I know there's always that talk, and you mentioned the Dodgers, of the Mets being that East Coast version of the Dodgers. But what they're doing down there in Tampa Bay with the pitching, and if they're able to turn Vassell into, a competent major league starter, and we've seen them do it with all types of pitchers that they get in trades. If the Mets can get to that point with pitching, especially in the baseball landscape we are in now, where free agent starting pitchers are super expensive for no apparent reason, not being able to go more than 5 or 6 innings, you really want to develop your starting pitching. And I've been talking about the Mets. If they're going to develop any type of strategy, it's developing starting pitching in the minor leagues. And the fact that, one, we got to see it last year a little bit with Christian Scott. We got to see the good and the bad portion of that. But now that we have Jonah Tong climbing the rankings, Nolan McLean climbing the rankings, Brandon Sproat is the top pitching prospect in the rankings. If the Mets can continue to develop these guys, and I don't know how much involved Jeremy Hefner is when it comes to the minor leagues on down. We've seen what he can do once these guys come to the major leagues, like we've seen what he's doing with Griffin Canning in spring, even though it's just spring. Clay Holmes, how that transition has been able to go for him now that he's the opening day starter with all the repertoire he has. Is there an effect? Is it the same, I guess, run organization down to the minors when it comes to this pitching lab that we're seeing, that they're getting the same things like the McLeans and the Sproats of the world? Are they getting touched with that pitching lab as well?
Yeah, for when they first got the pitching lab, it looks like the structure, they did it this past season. So they did it, I guess, 2 years in a row. Like right at the end of the year, right when the season ends and everyone goes home, like not everyone goes home yet. So, and I was hearing about some of the minor league pitchers, when the season ended, you're not leaving yet. And then they end up going into the lab first and they throw an assortment of pitches, not a lot, but they get into the lab at the end of the year. And then they kind of calculate and tabulate a bunch of things. And I believe they also try to structure some of the offseason workouts also based on that, based on the nutrition, based on all of those things. But it does also start with the pitching lab as well. So again, all these new resources in the Mets organization, all the minor leaguers are having it. And I know there were some hitters sprinkling into the lab, but not many. But it kind of sounds like this past offseason, even more of the minor league hitters are going to start getting a chance in the lab version for them as well. I know it existed the year prior, but not many hitters had enough time to get into it. So now you're going to be all cylinders a go for all the minor leaguers. And they have some amazing, player development staff. They have amazing coaches. Some of the pitching coaches in the minor leagues, like Dan McKinney, Jordan Krause, they've been like piggybacking each other from low A to high A last year. And now they both got promotions. So now one's in high A, one's in double A. So they're going to be developing the pitchers at one level. And when they get promoted, the other guy, and they share communication really well in the Mets organization. So these guys, and they're very analytically driven. So they were even before Stearns got involved. So I'm sure when Stearns came, one of the good reasons to keep these guys around, certain guys, they love the communication. They love the analytical minds that they have. So it's going to be a good structure, good transition up the levels for another year.
Where does, because you mentioned him, Blade Tidwell fit into this situation? Starter, there's more talk about him being a reliever in the organization. Where do you see the final stage of Blade Tidwell when he gets to major leagues?
I mean, and I know, again, he had an off year last year. So all of a sudden everyone's like, well, here's the thing about Blade Tidwell, who could also throw up to 100. And that's when you start getting excited, right? Well, some of the command wasn't fully there. So it's like, oh, okay, just make him a high leverage reliever. He'll be 98 to 100. He'll be a setup man. I mean, it sounds great, and he has the stuff for it. But then he comes into camp throwing that filth with command, even in a random spring game. And now everyone's like, oh, wait a minute. So the jury is still out on Blade Tidwell as a starter. And if it was up to me, why not have him break camp in the Syracuse rotation? Like, I'm trying to put into my mind how many pitchers they have at this point. And I know you could play around with it. You could piggyback starters, which they've been doing for a couple of years anyway. Especially in the low minors, everyone pitches 3-4 innings, it seems like, because there's too many guys. I don't know if you want to do that in Syracuse when some of these guys, for better or worse, might be needed. But I could see Tidwell in the rotation. But again, now, if you were to ask me, and I've been honest about it in the last year or so, names like Tidwell, Hamill, even one of my favorites, Yoenis Suarez, Felipe de la Cruz. I love those guys, and they've been eating starter innings. I wouldn't mind, Dove would not mind if, a couple or a few of them transitioned to a reliever situation, in pro ball for this season. Will it happen? I don't know. But the stuff of Tidwell, we were thinking about his stuff in the Sproat level before AAA did AAA things to almost all the arms last year for Syracuse. So it's kind of like, what was the blip on the screen last year for Syracuse and with the pitching? Because, I mean, it seemed like everybody had up and down seasons. Nobody was truly consistent. So I don't want to downgrade Blade Tidwell because of AAA last year when it seems like every arm there kind of struggled.
I think the good thing about David Stearns and what he's doing, and I guess in conjunction with Jeremy Hefner, is they're breeding more versatility when it comes to pitching, more starters converted into long men and vice versa. So I think that Blade Tidwell still, like you mentioned, has the opportunity to possibly be a starting pitcher. Now, when we talk about Brandon Sproat, There's a big chance that this season we see him in the major leagues. I feel like he's got the same trajectory to get to the major leagues as Christian Scott did last season. We know what the Mets rotation is right now. Obviously, it won't be like that all season long. What does Sproat have to do to take the next steps to get closer to Queens?
I mean, they were mentioning it, in the show, like even I think Joe DeMayo was talking about it, Mr. Analyst Joe DeMayo on SNY. And when you talk about like even Stern's philosophy, which I was watching in the minor league season, he was rushing guys. He was rushing all of them. He was pushing guys to higher levels, maybe even before they were ready, and then see if they struggle. And again, Sproat went all the way up and struggled. And the organization now feels technically that's kind of a good thing. Not that you do bad, but get out there. You're not completely dominating everyone. I think when he was in A-ball, it was ridiculous. I mean, his ERA, I don't think it was over 2. The K rate was insane. So it's good to be tested in the AAA level because now you're going to have veterans. You're going to have guys age 27 to like 32 in AAA. They'll using the term, they'll spit on the slider off the plate. So that's the thing. Now he's got to start making his adjustments when some of these veteran guys, especially in the major leagues, when they start spitting at those pitches. Like, what is going to be your arsenal that maintains the command but doesn't, hover too much over the plate and you get pounded on one of those sliders that that kind of goes whoops and it went right over the middle. It's going to be about command for him. I think the confidence and the work ethic is there, so I don't think he needs to work on that. That's what staff already told me he's got locked in. So, yeah, with pitch command, I would still definitely need him in AAA. I know everyone was excited when he started throwing really hard in camp, and they were like, start him now. No. Let him go to Syracuse. Let him be in a rotation, which, again, I don't know how many pitchers they're going to have. I think they still have that, 6-game schedule anyway, so it's going to be weird how they kind of do that. Let him be in the rotation, work on the command of all of his pitches, make sure they're in the right places in the zone. And he's going to be one of those guys by summer. He's probably already up, hopefully for better or worse, meaning if something can happen with the rotation. But maybe either way, they might just be seeing too much from him and they need his help.
We're going to get back into the spring breakout game and some of the top performances. A shout out to everyone that's in the room right now, 181 of you. Make sure you like this video. Make sure you're subscribing not only to me, but to Ernest and the New York Mets Dove Report. I'm saying it correctly on YouTube. Make sure you're subscribing to that as well. I got a comment here and shout out to everyone who's been commenting. Appreciate it all. Nelson Cruz saying, feeling good about our young pitching. Even guys that are coming back from injury like Matt Allen, Christian Scott can help in the future. Now, we talked about Christian Scott already. Matt Allen has had some type of story to just try to get back to this. What are your thoughts on Allen? Can he, find his way through the minors?
It's going to be fascinating to see. I think there was one reporter, if it might have been Tacoma, like somebody in a month or two ago, and then I confirmed the existence. I started asking around other players in camp. I'm like, is Matt Allen a real human? And they were like, confirmed. I'm looking at him. So I know he's there. He's in Port St. Lucie. He's in camp. He's throwing. When I try to ask certain details, even some of the staff are like, for privacy, to be honest, Ernest, I can't really tell you much. I just know that he looks good and he looks strong, but no details on his throwing regimen. And even when I ask one of the people within the Mets organization, one of the higher ups, they're rooting for him. Like they're literally like, I'm rooting for him. So the Mets organization from the highest up, even the higher ups are just rooting for Matt Allen and the idea of Matt Allen because of all the work that he's put in. And again, there's so many guys coming back from injury. Even the Jet Williams, Gilbert, even on the pitching side, I heard good news this week, literally today, for one of the relievers, Eli Ankney, former 20th round pick who got drafted, came out of nowhere, started dominating in pro ball in his first season, and then Tommy John. And then now he's coming back strong, so now he looks good. He could be one of those fast rising relievers. Like they talked about Ryan Lambert at the spring game because he throws 100. Eli Ankney doesn't throw 100, but he's going to throw in the 90s. And he could be one of those guys when he gets healthy, he may jump to the levels really, really fast as a reliever, solely a reliever.
Now, going back to this game here, had some big offensive performances as well. Infielder Boston Barrow, 2 for 3, had a home run and 2 runs scored off. Outfielder Nick Marbito, 2 for 3, had 2 RBIs. Where do these guys fit into the Mets' plans? Your thoughts on that?
It does sound like they're definitely excited about Boston Barrow. No bias here, but I did interview him. You can go on my YouTube channel and just look for Ernest Dove, and you can look for my interview with Boston Barrow last year. The thing with him was he was drafted out of high school, and I've been joking about him online, calling him Boston Jeff McNeil Barrow, because he's put on a lot of weight and he still looks skinny. So he's a tall, young, athletic man who's been putting on, I believe he put on over 25 pounds of muscle from draft to last spring. And then when I asked this past offseason, how's Boston doing? He's put on more strength. Sounds good to me. He has room for it because he has that tall frame. And then sure enough, he just hits a opposite field home run. So I think the strengthening has been working, whether it's 25, whether it's 30 pounds of added muscle by now in his second year. That's something to be excited about because I also like his plate discipline. And I believe Keith Law has him ranked in his personal top 10. So you could say a lot of things about Keith Law. Everyone fights with the different people who rank players. But when Keith Law has him in the top 10 and kind of nobody else, not even Mets bloggers have been putting him that high, I don't believe. So there's a lot of belief in Boston Barrow. But, of course, I believe in him. It sounds like, as far as I know, I don't know of him being tested in the outfield still. I've been asking for everybody to be more versatile, and I think Boston Barrow could be one of those second base, shortstop, third base guys still for right now, and then maybe we'll see. But keep using that versatility, and I want to see where he goes. I'm assuming he may still start in A-ball. There's going to be plenty of guys everywhere. So I'm curious, but I know the organization is still pretty excited about him.
Another guy that the Mets are excited about, Ryan Clifford, 1 for 4, had a 2-run home run, 449 feet to dead center. He makes the all-spring breakout first team. Does Clifford have that raw power like we saw from Pete Alonso back in 2018, 2019?
I mean, that's hard to say something like that. I remember even Alonso in the minor leagues, and oh man, me and my friend Scott Cohen used to watch him in the workouts, and you hit the ball, you can hear it from like anywhere in the backfields, any of the 4 fields. Ryan Clifford, as far as current guys, he's one of the most powerful guys in the farm system. I'm not really sure who has more power than him. I love my guy, Jeffrey Barry Bonds Rosa in the lower minor leagues. I know he struggled last year, but Ryan Clifford in that spring game, he kind of did what Ryan Clifford does. He struck out a couple of times and then hit an absolute nuke. So this is what we got, and he's still only 21 years old. I'm not even sure when he turns 22. So it's going to be a really interesting, important season for Ryan Clifford. And I know it's scary. People shouldn't even mention the replacement things for Alonso. That's just the kid doesn't need the pressure. We're in 2025. Alonso's getting a heck of a lot of money. The Mets are trying to go for a title this year. So let's not worry about who he could be replacing next year. But that power is absolutely real. Can the hit tool get him to the majors? Because he can hit it. He can annihilate a ball, and he can draw a walk. But is he Joey Gallo, or is he going to have a higher hit tool? I think there could be still more room to grow. Even a couple of months last year when he was getting out of Brooklyn, because no lefty can hit in Brooklyn. So when he started to get into Binghamton, get away from Brooklyn, I think he had a couple of months of hitting the old school batting average went up when he got to Binghamton. So I want to see the batting average and the K rate from day one, which I'm assuming he may repeat Binghamton as well. That's really all I'm caring about because I think the power is going to be there now.
He still has, ways to go here. And I know the talk is not to talk about, what's going to happen next year, but it for him to stay focused in the minors and what he's doing and his improvement is of the utmost importance. Outside of that, you're looking at possibly Pete leaving. Are the Mets going to go after a guy like Vladimir Guerrero Jr. or not? Obviously, depending on the money and like where does Clifford fit into that whole situation? If he shows, a vast improvement, that could probably help them decide, you know what, maybe we're not going to go this route. Maybe we're going to stay in-house. And, maybe Mark Vientos goes to first base until a guy like Clifford is ready to go. I mean, I like you, I don't want to look that far into, but it's always something to consider and just to have in the back of your mind.
Well, yeah, of course. There's going to be so many other factors. I know the one thing everyone asks about Ryan Clifford is, is he going to be the first base? And that's it. Because there's been questions about his defensive abilities in the outfield, corner outfield long term. So if he does have to be a 1B only, I mean, that's kind of what it is. You're not going to have a guy like this, like a Vientos. You don't want to have him be like, he's so good, we'll make him the DH at 23, 24 years old. I mean, it's not impossible, but even value-wise, do you want to have a Vientos be the full-time DH? And I know some Mets fans will be like, yes, we want an $800 million payroll, and then Vientos will be the DH because some other, Bregman was at third, this guy was at first, Vladdy here. Let's just have everybody everywhere. Who's the highest paid second baseman? We'll sign him too. I mean, I get it, but and then again, newsflash. Dove's breaking amazing news, talking with important people in the Mets organization who told me free agency is expensive. So, yeah, I don't know if that implies they don't want to keep doing this like another Soto anymore, but it's expensive, and they do want to farm more players. I mean, I'm not really breaking anything specific here. They want to have more farm guys rather than keep signing more and more Sotos and Lindors. It's just not going to be sustainable anyway. And even if you did that, what are you going to do? I want to win the World Series, and then you're going to have like 20 guys that are 38 years old all on the team, and you're going to just tell the guy with all the money to just DFA everyone and defer the money. Give them all Bobby Bonilla money until they're 100 years old. But, I mean, you have to start building from within. That's also why I don't think Vladdy's ever going to show up to the Mets, even if everybody wants Cohen to throw around the money. I don't see it. I think at some point you got to farm your own people. It doesn't mean it's going to be Ryan Clifford and that's it, but it could. There's going to be outfielders. We haven't talked about Carson Benz yet. Drew Gilbert, apparently still not 100% healthy. He's still trying to work his way back. Those are two of the outfield names. We all know about me and my Jesus Baez obsession. So there's going to be other guys coming up over the years, but, who do they replace? I mean, these things always work themselves out.
Well, yeah, and as Aaron Manning puts, our future is so bright, no reason to spend like crazy. Let the kids play. You look at what they're trying to do in bringing in a guy like Soto, and look how long it took the Dodgers to do what they did this offseason. More than a decade for them to get to this point and still have 1.5 world championships because of it. So, it just doesn't work for everyone. And you even see what the Braves, maybe the Mets take up kind of what the Braves do and start signing their own guys to specific deals and not overpay. So we'll see what happens there. There's one more prospect I want to get into that had a, top performance that kind of gets lost in the shuffle, has not had a great Met career. Minor career so far after being, top pick for the Mets. Kevin Parado is 2 for 3 with the run. He's really taken a back seat, like I said, after being top drafted a few years ago. What does he have to do to improve his standing in the organization?
Well, I guess he's got to hit more. I mean, that's the thing. He put up like Barry Bonds numbers in college. So everyone was excited to see what was going to happen. That's what they talked about. Like the day he was drafted, it was like, what are they going to do with Alvarez when Parada gets there? They were already penciling him in one way or another, and you got to play the game first. And I know when he first started in pro ball, he had certain things, the way he held the bat. It was maybe there was like too much movement. And I was knowing when he was hitting in St. Lucie, the thing that he did with the bat, and he starts moving it around while the pitcher is delivering. And it looks like this year, all of that is completely gone. And there was the talk of him losing a bunch of weight, maybe 10, 20 pounds. So now we have a lighter Kevin Parada. His plate discipline kind of looks different. The approach, how he holds the bat, everything changed this year. And I mean, I know for catchers, you never really want a lot of offense. You don't really technically worry about it. But the thing with Parada from the time of the draft, he was seen as a bat first guy anyway. So they want the bat one way or another. I believe a couple of years ago, the Blue Jays were doing something. They had 2 or 3 catchers. They were finding time somewhere on the roster because they were all pretty good together. So you could fit a guy like Parada. But again, here we are. Even in camp, he's getting some run. He's in this game. But then you have Hayden Singer is the one with a shot. You know what I mean? Like, because Hayden Singer's he's showing off the arm, by the way. And Singer, they're really good behind the plate. The pitchers, for years, some of the pitchers that were telling me they love throwing to Hayden Singer. So everyone's got their thing. Parada's going to have to hit bombs. And I know we started doing it a little bit, I think, at the end of last year as well. So we got to see the hit tool, like, legit. Like, if he's in the minor leagues, obviously, AAA, he's got to start hitting, like, almost 300 and hit over 20 bombs in AAA to kind of show off and get the value back. But, again, he's not even being ranked anymore by a lot of people, including bloggers and national writers. I myself can run off, like, 4 catchers that I really like, almost ahead of Parada at this point. But they're all kind of younger, so is it fair? I'm going off projections and ceilings. A guy like Chris Suero, who's in the spring game, I love me some Chris Suero. And they talked about it on the broadcast that, like, he's a super athlete. So when I asked one of the scouts last year, what are your thoughts on, can Chris Suero be a catcher? And they basically wrote me back like, he could do whatever he wants. He's so athletic. He could be catcher. He could be left field. I don't care. Put him wherever you want. So he has the ability, but is he going to be a full-time catcher first and foremost? That's interesting to know. Davidson Gutierrez, I didn't think the offense would do what it did last year. And here he is in the spring breakout game. They must see a lot of Davidson Gutierrez all of a sudden. He was a huge signing bonus kid out of the IFA class, but I didn't know he was going to hit like that the way he did last year. And we haven't even seen Giovanni Rodriguez yet, who got so insanely hyped last year. So, and then there's also Ronald Hernandez from the Marlins trade a couple of years ago. Yeah. So I'm naming up to 4 catchers who are younger than Parada that have certain ceiling. And again, they're not all going to be catching for the Mets. So I know eventually people are going to trade them away from me and make me sad. But I mean, the catcher position is absolutely loaded in the Mets farm system right now. And I still want to include Parada because he's still there. He's still only like 23. It's not like he's 29 at this point. So catchers can develop late. But again, when is it all going to click for him?
Which other Mets prospects maybe I haven't mentioned that kind of caught your eye during this game, this spring breakout game?
Well, it was actually one play. If you were excited to see when Bohan Adderley probably took off the Ryan Clifford's hand when he threw the pitch from shortstop, because he threw an absolute cannon on one of the grounders that went to short. Bohan Adderley is one of those, like, another huge athlete guy. And when I talked to some of the scouts last year in the Dominican Republic, they said that he looked better than everybody there. The stats weren't mind-boggling, but they were like, no, he's just better than everyone. We haven't seen it yet, but they have a lot of confidence in Bohan Adderley. So I'm excited about him. Jacob Reimer had a lost season, and he's one of the younger guys that had a lost season. I mean, Jet's young too, but he's a top prospect. Jacob Reimer was hovering in the top 20 already based on how good he was and good plate discipline. He didn't do like extremely well, but I'm excited about a healthy Jacob Reimer this year. I'm trying to think. Trey Schneider, another young kid who's just not ready yet. Must have been a great experience being in that game. So even them putting him in this game says something. But and then it's just all the arms. Jonathan Santucci, he's not comparable to David Peterson in certain ways, but he could be the next Peterson 2.0 in the rotation. He's got a lot going on. He could throw 97, 98. They love his breaking ball. I think he throws a great slider. He's working on his changeup. And then tell me if you've heard this before, command. So we got to worry about the command and the walk rate. So, but Santucci's got that. We talked for a second about Ryan Lambert throwing 99 or 100. He was in an interview. He's like, I could throw 102. Please don't try to do that unless it comes natural. But there's a lot of arms to be excited about that were even showing off in this game. They didn't even have some of the guys pitch because of the delays. I was excited to see if Ryan Ammons would get into the game because I've heard good things about him. The Frank Ellisalt, I think it's from last year's draft. One of the coaches told me I really like what I'm seeing from him in camp early on. So even a lot of the 2024 draft class is looking great. And even some of the other guys, even down the farm, Zach Thornton, he's a lefty that looks really good. He's up to 5 pitches in his arsenal right now. And Zach Thornton apparently is the new Clay Holmes. He's got the kick change. It's the new fad, and now it's dripping down to the minors. Like you're saying, hey, the lab, does it go to the minor leagues? Kick change. Now it's a minor leaguer with a kick change. And I heard his fastball, the velocity's up for Zach Thornton from what it was last year with the kick change. I think he's working on a curveball. Things are looking good everywhere. And now I haven't even talked about Nick Rosselli, who wasn't in this game, but he's busy hitting in Major League spring games. He did it again today in the other split squad game.
Yeah, that was the tying hit, I think, to tie the game up there, right?
And then he had, I guess it was considered a single. I guess he went to second a few games ago. And then the last MLB spring game was he hooked one in the left field, ended up going to second, but I think it's considered an RBI single. And then I heard in between those Major League spring games, he was basically getting a hit every day in the backfields. He had an inside the park home run. That must have been fun to watch. And he had a double, and I think he had a single. And he had a few opposite field hits, even in the backfields too. So he looks like a spray hitter, but also has power. So that's pretty exciting when you can go oppo one way or another.
I have to bring up this tweet from Joe DeMaio. You mentioned the pitching during that game. Just look at all of the miles per hour these guys are throwing. From Jonah Tong, you mentioned Jonathan Bittar, Dylan Ross at 100 miles per hour. You mentioned Santucci, Ryan Lambert, like a serious gas from these guys. Any of these guys that we could possibly see come out of relief for them, obviously not Jonah Tong. They're going to keep him on the starting pitchers route. But any of these guys you think that we could see in a pinch, maybe? We know how the bullpen starts one way, ends with a whole bunch of people towards the end of the season. Any of these guys at all, maybe we might see?
I mean, honestly, it would be hard to count against a guy like Ryan Lambert. If he's throwing 99 to 101 plus, it's going to be interesting to see what that looks like in the upper minors. Again, Dylan Ross, I feel like I haven't seen him in 10 years. So he probably has some catching up to do this minor league season just to eat the innings. But Ryan Lambert, he'd be pretty interesting. Again, if he's throwing 100 in Syracuse or even in Double-A, I'm not even sure where he's going to start. But even if he's in Double-A, throwing 100, you probably want to get him up to the majors a little bit quicker than somebody else out of the pen like that. So those are the main guys that I can see. As a Pintaro, he's just a guy like I think of like a Yoander Suarez too. And now it's all about Pintaro. But would they be like the Mets Seth Lugo? And I'm saying Mets. I'm not calling him a Cy Young candidate on the Royals or whatever. Can one of these guys, can Pintaro go to the majors in 2025 in a Buto or Mets Seth Lugo role? Those could be some of the roles that even guys like that can fill. But as a Lambert, he's probably going to be a run and gun, 1 inning only, throw absolute fire, and then get him out of there. He could be an interesting guy to do that. And I think they love the spin on Ryan Lambert's ball too. So they love the spin along with the 100. So if he can have command of those two at the same time, he may even jump all the way to the majors this year.
I want to get into the prospects outlook here. I have a graphic for the top 10 from MLB Pipeline, as well as the top 10 from Joe DeMaio here. Both have Brandon Sproat at number 1. Both have Jet Williams at number 2. Where it differs, Carson Bench on the MLB Pipeline 3, whereas Nolan McLean is number 3. And you talked about him pitching earlier. Both have Clifford at 4. Actually, it's flip-flopped. If you look at it, McLean and Carson Bench are flip-flopped in the 3 and 5 spot for each. Jesus Baez at number 6 for Joe DeMaio has Tong 7, Ronnie Mauricio 8, Elian Pena 9, and Drew Gilbert 10. Whereas MLB Pipeline has Luis Angel Acuna at 7, Jesus Baez 8, Elian Pena 9, Ronnie Mauricio 10, and at 11 they had Drew Gilbert. Where do you align more with prospect rankings here? Is it the MLB pipeline? Is it the list that Joe DeMayo has? Do you have your own ranking at this moment in time?
I mean, I kind of always, my little ebb and flow of my rankings that probably change by the day when I'm feeling it. I mean, obviously the top two, they make sense to me. I consider Sproat, even though, again, I just talked about it. I have Tong almost as a 1A to Sproat pitching wise, but he's earned it to be number one as the best pitcher. Jet Williams, technically the best hitter. They both make sense to me. Me and my bias, I would jump Jesus Baez all the way to number 3, to be honest. Speak based on absolute ceiling as a do-it-all player, because Jesus Baez is really good defensively. I love his instincts. I love his arm. I love his range. I love his everything. So that's why, to go with the hit tool where he not barely, but he has a low enough K rate, a high enough walk rate, so he makes a lot of contact with all that defense. So that's why I kind of would have him very high, although I'm not against Carson Benj being as high as he is, because I kind of see them similar-ish as far as the exit velo guys. Baez and Benj are the kind of guys, like a Mauricio. The three of them are the kind of guys where if they get a hit, you're probably going to want to know what the exit velocity was, because a lot of the time it's probably going to be 99 to 100 plus. So they have that type of bat when they barrel up. And that's why I would jump him above people like Ryan Clifford. And again, Benj, it's okay if Benj is ahead of Baez either way. Maybe I would, for Joe DeMayo's list, I would have Tong higher, Baez higher. Maybe I would drop McClain and Clifford a little bit. The Elian Pena thing is funny because I've been talking about him too. And I was joking that the day he signs, I have him number 10 on my list no matter what. And then here he is, number 9 on a couple of lists. So that's kind of funny. I basically had him 10 either way. I thought he would be top 10 literally the second he signed because of the hype surrounding him. But a lot of the lists, it's always tough. What do you do with the Mauricio and Acuna at this point? Because they've kind of like been there-ish. They've seen it. So it's weird to rank guys who are now have seen Major League kind of, at-bats here and there. But they're okay. They deserve to still be in a top 10. That's fine. And I know Drew Gilbert, I'm assuming, of course, he probably got dropped because of a lost season. And when he tries to come back, he's only hitting about 200 in a lost season. You kind of like lose points, I guess, for that. So it's okay. But they never saw him as a super high ceiling guy, maybe a really nice floor guy, that I could still see Drew Gilbert absolutely in the majors this year, filling in for somebody one way or another. So he still deserves to be on the list.
Speaking of Luis Angel Acuna, were you surprised when they brought him up, the success that he had right off the bat? Was it just the pitchers not getting used to throwing to him and then figuring him out towards the end of the season? He had a pretty good, week and a half filling in for what was the MVP of our team. So he did an admirable job. Were you surprised considering how he was in AAA last season and the struggles that he had?
I mean, it was interesting. Everybody's pointed it out. I think his OPS was in the 600s the whole year. And it was like, well, he's a bust. And when I started asking the last year's AAA hitting coach, and he said, listen, I see progress every single week from Acuna. I think his second half is going to be great. I believe in him, and I think it's coming one way or another, so don't listen to anybody else. And then he showed up. I don't know about the thing with the lights, the brighter lights in the major league ballparks. I know minor league ballparks kind of are what they are. I, of course, love my Clover Park, but the minor leagues is a whole different thing, especially in A ball when you only have 2 umpires in low A. So if the ball gets hit, you have one of those check swings and the umpire's at third base, you point to the third base umpire is going to say if the guy check swinged or not. And that's when he's on the other, if it's a righty, and it's not the first base ump. So a lot of things happen in these games that changes, maybe even the lighting, maybe this, maybe distractions. There's always going to be something. But I'm still surprised that he did what he did. Again, the AAA coach is like, you guys are undervaluing him. So I respect him. He's a professional. But it did seem crazy seeing him did what he did so quickly. And it looks like he could still be really good. I'm not worried about spring stats. I don't know. He had some hitless ones. Then he had a couple of hits. he's not really playing 9 innings anyway. So if he was playing every day and he was hitting under 200 in spring, I'd be like, oh, okay, maybe he's struggling. But when you get 1 or 2 at bats every second or third spring game, it's hard to kind of show up the way he did playing every single day under the lights when it mattered last year.
Before I let you go, who do you think is on their way to cracking the top 10 this season for Mets prospects?
I mean, some of them, depending on, I'm trying to think of other guys. I try to talk about so many players at this point. Who else could be higher up? Because again, Boston Barrow, again, he's only in Keith Law's top 10. He's not in their top 10. So I guess for purposes of this, using those graphics, I'll say Boston Barrow could probably end up being in the top 10 by the end of this year. I'm trying to, who else could jump? It'd be interesting to see some of the guys that are coming back from injuries, how they're going to look. There's so many guys that are coming back from, like, I don't know where they were. Even one of my younger pitchers, Joel Diaz, who was very, very highly ranked. Then he had surgery like everyone seems to have. Then he had an up and down season last year. I want to see what a healthy Joel Diaz does in the low minors maybe. Again, maybe one of these other catching prospects. Daverson Gutierrez, what if he hits again like he did last year? Those are the things that could make guys jump up. But, yeah, maybe Boston Barrow. It'd be interesting. I'm just trying to think of any other names right now who could really make a name for themselves. But we've already talked about a lot, which I love to do.
Ernest, I can't thank you enough for doing this again this year. It's always great talking with you, especially during a spring breakout. And we'll be in touch and have you on the show more often. Let everyone know what you got coming up, what you're working on.
Well, I'm also looking into certain things. You might see me again reporting this weekend from Clover Park. I'm trying to confirm all the logistics on that. Obviously, follow the YouTube channel. You even search the name Ernest Dove. I'll try to look into some other things, maybe more interviews. I'll try to set certain things up. And also be on the lookout for certain websites like Mets News and Links, also found on Twitter. If you want to look up Mets News and Links. And also Max Mets, both.blogspot.com. And also SportsWire Radio. Shout out to SportsWire Radio at SPORTZ, wireradio.org. They talk about every sport imaginable, including wrestling. And in Europe, they do everything you need, really. Those are some of all the sites and sounds and the podcasts that you'll find me on. And I just want to keep producing as much content as I can. So when the season starts, I do have official media credentials again for the St. Lucie Mets season. So during this minor league season, please be on the lookout for my social media pages and on YouTube, even specific to my reporting from inside Clover Park for another low A season.
Yeah, please, everyone, follow Ernest Dove at Ernest Dove on X, a.k.a. the Prospect Hugger. Make sure you're giving him a follow. New York Mets prospects reporter for covering St. Lucie Mets, as well as all the Mets minors. New York Mets Dove Report on YouTube. Subscribe to the channel right now if you're not done so. Ernest, thanks so much. Appreciate you for coming on. We'll do this again soon, my friend.
Thank you.
All right, that was Ernest Dove. Like I said, make sure you're following him at Ernest Dove and follow the New York Mets Dove Report on YouTube. Now, one final thing before we wrap up the show, a little bit of news and happenings. I talked about it last week, but I want to reiterate it because it's coming this Sunday, folks. Dr. K Q&A, or like I like to call it, the Q&A with Dr. K, Sunday, March 23rd at 2 p.m. Dwight Gooden will be doing a Q&A signing at Catch Astoria Gastro Pub, 3119 Newtown Avenue, Astoria, New York. Admission is $45 plus fees, including an autograph of an item you provide. If you want additional autographs, $20 as well. All of this presented by the Queens Baseball Convention, the QBC. And guess what? Yours truly will be hosting this Sunday. So not only do you get to meet Doc Gooden, but you can see me as well. But I know you want to see Doc Gooden more. Get an autograph, meet him, take pictures. That'll be a great event. Thanks and shout out to Keith Blacknick, a.k.a. the Media Goon, and QBC for making this opportunity possible. Appreciate it and can't wait to see not only Doc, but all of you guys out there Sunday. And we're going to wrap up the show here. Once again, shout out to Ernest Dove for being a part of the show. And you can follow me on X, Instagram, and TikTok at Subway to Shea. You can follow me personally on X at Ant Rivera 86. If you want to listen to the podcast, subscribe on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. But if you want to be a part of the interaction, comments, questions, be a part of the chat, you want to subscribe on YouTube, you can watch on X. I think you can comment on X as well. But being on YouTube with the Mets fam, with the Subway to Shea fam, it's a great to be a part of the show. Shout out to 314 of you that were a part of this podcast. Can't tell you how much I appreciate you. Next week, we are on the road to opening day, and I think it is time for our season preview. We will get into all of that. Thank you so much for tuning in. For Anthony Rivera, for the Subway to Shea podcast, always remember, let's go Mets.